Happy Wednesday, friends. Okay, so some of you might be having a little deja vu right now, and you're not wrong. If you listened last week, this episode title looks very familiar. And if you caught it the day it dropped, gold star for you. Here's the thing though. I came back from vacation and hit record basically the moment I walked in the door, and wow. You could hear the exhaustion in my voice. And my dog decided she had some things throughout the entire episode that she wanted to say. Truly a team effort. When I listened back, I just couldn't leave it up in good conscience. So I took it down, spruced it up, added a little extra goodness, and recorded it again like a human being who has actually slept. So, thank you for your patience, and I promise it's worth it. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to the Wednesday Project. I'm Christina, and I'm glad you're here. If you've been with us over the last several weeks, you know we've been in the middle of something. We've been walking through a series on relational theology, on what it means to love well, to need people without losing yourself, and to stay connected without collapsing. And if you're joining us for the first time today, welcome. You don't need the whole arc to receive what's here. But if you do want to go back, I'd encourage you to start from the beginning. There's a thread running through all of it. Last week, we talked about love without collapse, what it looks like to stay present to another person, fully, genuinely present, without disappearing into them. And this week, I want to take us somewhere that I think is essential before we can talk about what happens when we miss each other. Before we can talk about repair, which is where we're headed next, I want to slow down and look at something that happens before the first word is ever spoken. Because I think most of us have had this experience. You're in a conversation with someone you care about, maybe someone you love deeply, and somewhere along the way, something shifts. It might be subtle, a tone that changes slightly, a pause that lingers just a little too long, something in your body that tightens before your mind even knows why. And suddenly, you're not just talking about what's in front of you anymore. You're trying to explain yourself or defend yourself or hold on to the connection in a way that feels just a little bit harder than it should be. And when it's over, you might find yourself wondering, what just happened? Because nothing about that interaction felt like what you actually wanted. One of the things I come back to again and again in my work and honestly in my own life is this. When two people sit down together, it isn't just two people in the room. Every conversation is one nervous system meeting another nervous system. And both of those systems are carrying a history. That history was already present before anyone opened their mouth, before the first word, before the first glance across the table. And here's what I want to anchor that in before we go any further, because I don't want this to feel like a psychology framework dressed up in spiritual language. I want to start where I think we actually have to start, with the fact that we are known before we speak. Psalm 139 verse 4 says this: Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, Lord. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I think we can read a verse like this and receive it as a comfort about prayer. God hears me even when I can't find the words. And that's true. And I think it's doing something even more foundational than that. It's telling us that there is a pre-verbal reality to who we are. That before language, before explanation, before we've made ourselves understood to anyone, we are already fully legible to God, already fully held. And that matters for this conversation because it means our embodied, storied, complicated selves are not a problem God is working around. They are known. They are seen. The nervous system that walks into every conversation carrying everything that has ever happened to it, that system is not foreign to the one who made it. That is where I want us to begin. Because the rest of what we talk about today only lands well when it's resting on that foundation. I want to name something clearly before we go any further. This is not just a couples episode. Yes, I see this dynamic most visibly in my work with couples because in romantic partnership, the stakes are high, the history is long, and the nervous system is paying very close attention. But this also happens with your mother, with your adult child, with your closest friend who's known you for 20 years, with that colleague you respect, but something always feels just slightly off between you, and with a sibling who can undo you with a single look in a way that no one else on earth can. Anywhere there is history and care, the nervous system brings its whole story into the room. And I want to describe what that actually looks like, because sometimes naming the experience is the first thing that helps. You misread a tone, or someone misreads yours. You feel dismissed, and that wasn't the intent at all, but the feeling is real. You try to explain yourself and find yourself explaining harder and with more words, hoping that the right combination will finally make them understand. Or you go quiet. You pull back. You decide it's not worth it, even though part of you knows that's not really what you believe. You say something and watch the other person go somewhere that you didn't send them. Sometimes the rupture isn't in the relationship. Sometimes it's in the moment. And here's what I most want you to hear. This does not mean something is wrong with you. It does not mean something is wrong with them. It does not mean the relationship is broken. It means you are human, embodied, storied, and so are they. Even people doing the work experience this. Even secure people. Even people who love each other with everything they have. This is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of humanity. So, let's talk about what's actually happening beneath the surface of these moments. Because I think when we understand the mechanism, we can hold the moment differently. We Do not enter conversations neutrally. This is one of the most important things to understand about human connection, and almost no one tells us. Your nervous system is always reading the room. We have talked about this. Before you're consciously aware of it, your body is scanning. It's scanning tone of voice, facial expression, even the energy someone's carrying when they walk in. And it's asking a question that is always being asked. Is this safe? Am I okay here? And when something registers as threat, even a small thing, even something that objectively isn't dangerous, the nervous system moves into protection before your conscious mind catches up. Before you've decided anything, your nervous system has already been told where to go. This isn't weakness. This isn't immaturity. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. You're not just talking to someone. You're in something with them. And when one nervous system shifts into protection, it pulls on the other. It's not metaphorical. Our nervous systems are genuinely porous. They read each other. They respond to each other, sometimes before a single word has been spoken. One person goes quiet, and the other leans in harder, trying to close the distance. One person's voice rises, and the other shuts down, needing to get small. Not because either person is failing, not because either person is trying to make things harder, but because nervous systems are in conversation with each other constantly underneath the conversation you're actually having. And I want to pause here and say something that I think matters deeply, especially for those of us who hold a Christian faith. Sometimes when we start talking about nervous systems and embodiment and the body's stress responses, it can feel like we're drifting away from theology. Almost like psychology and faith are in two separate rooms and we're spending too much time in the wrong one. But I want to push back on that gently because I think that the incarnation tells us something that we've not fully absorbed. Scripture calls Jesus the Word made flesh, not merely the Word made idea, not the Word made doctrine. Flesh, a body, presence, nearness, weight and breath and exhaustion and tears. The Son of God did not stand at a safe distance from human experience and explain us from above. He entered it. He entered embodiment willingly, fully, and without reservation. Which means our humanity, our nervous systems, our histories, our bodies that carry everything that's ever happened to them is not an inconvenience to God. It is the very thing He chose to inhabit. Christianity is not a faith that rejects embodiment. God entered it. And if God entered it, then we don't have to be ashamed of it. We don't have to apologize for the fact that we are storied people who walk into rooms already full. That is not a spiritual deficiency. That is what it means to be human. And Jesus knows what that is like from the inside. I tell people I work with, couples, yes, but also friends, parents, their adult children, anyone navigating a relationship that matters. I tell them, just as I am bringing my story into this room, so are they. That one reframe changes things. It moves us from accusation to curiosity, from what is wrong with them to what are they carrying? And I say this not just as a clinician. I say this as someone who has needed it personally. Some of my most important relationships were deeply impacted by my inability to see the other story, or even just to acknowledge that it was there. I wanted them to see me. I needed to be seen. And that need was real and it was valid, but I couldn't see them. And they couldn't fully see me because we both needed to see ourselves first. And part of what I've had to learn, slowly, imperfectly, is that no human being was ever meant to carry the full weight of proving my worth to me. People matter deeply. Relationships matter deeply. But beneath every longing to be fully understood by another human, there is an even deeper longing to be fully known by God. And that longing has an answer that no human relationship can fully give. Only He can. That doesn't diminish what we actually need from each other. It actually frees it. When I stop asking the person across from me to be more than human, I can receive what they actually are, which is a storied, nervous system carrying, image bearing person doing their best to show up for me. And that is enough. That is actually really beautiful. The present moment is rarely the only thing happening in a conversation. When a tone triggers something in us, we are often pattern matching to a moment that came long before this one. A particular silence that carries the shape of a parent who used to go cold. A raised voice that the body recognizes as something older and more dangerous than what's actually in the room. A pause that feels like abandonment, even though no one is leaving. The nervous system doesn't always know the difference between then and now. It just knows that something familiar is happening. And it responds the way it learned to respond a long time ago. The reaction makes sense, even when it doesn't fit the moment. I want to sit with that for a moment because I think it can be genuinely releasing if we let it. The reaction makes sense. Your reaction makes sense. Their reaction makes sense. Not as an excuse. We remain responsible for what we do with our activation, for our words, our actions, the care we bring or fail to bring to the people we love. But responsibility held with understanding looks different than responsibility held with shame. One closes us down. The other opens us toward something better. There's a passage in Matthew 7 that most of us have heard as corrective, as a rebuke almost. And Jesus says here, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye?" We usually hear this as, deal with your own stuff before you go after someone else's. And yes, there's that. But I don't think Jesus says this to shame us. I think he says it because he understands how difficult it is for wounded people to see each other clearly. He understands how much history walks into every room. He is not standing above us with a corrective posture. He's close to us, saying, I know what you're carrying, and I know it's making it hard to see. So, what if the log isn't primarily about moral failure? Could the log also be unprocessed story? What if Jesus is saying, you cannot see clearly what is happening between you and another person when your own nervous system history is blocking your view? The log is what we carry in. The accumulated weight of every relationship that taught us what to expect from people. Every wound that trained our nervous system to protect itself in particular ways. And the invitation, the real invitation, is not self-criticism. It is self-awareness as an act of love toward the relationship. When I can see what I'm carrying, I can hold it instead of handing it to the person across from me. That doesn't mean I have to resolve everything before I'm allowed to connect. It means I can acknowledge it. I can say quietly, even just to myself, something in me just got activated. And that activation has a history. And when I can do that, even imperfectly, I stop asking the person across from me to carry something that was never theirs to carry. So, what do we actually do with this? I want to bring you to one more text, James 1:19. Most of us know it. Most of us think we know what it means. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. We usually receive this as a communication principle, a better way to have conversations. Listen first, don't interrupt, watch your temper. And yes, all of that. And I think James is also describing something embodied, something that lives in the body before it lives in the mind. Slowness creates the conditions for the nervous system to come back into regulation before our words do more damage than anyone intended. Be slow is a body instruction, not just a conversational one. One of the things I teach to people I work with is this. Before you engage with the nervous system across from you, tend to your own. This isn't withdrawal. This isn't avoidance. This isn't going cold or shutting the person out. It is the most loving thing you can do for the conversation. To not bring your full activation into contact with theirs before you've had even a moment to orient yourself. You cannot pour from a dysregulated system. And what does that actually look like? It might be a breath, a hand placed quietly on your own chest, That could be a moment of honest internal acknowledgement. Something in me just shifted. I noticed that. I'm going to be gentle with myself right now. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be a whole process. It just has to be honest. And I want to say clearly, this is not about becoming less feeling. Because I know some of you will hear regulate your nervous system and translate it as stop feeling so much. And that is not what I'm saying. The goal is not emotional detachment. The goal is enough steadiness to stay curious instead of defensive. Enough presence to remain open to the person in front of you and to the story they walked in carrying. Curiosity is one of my favorite words in the therapy room because curiosity requires that we don't already know the answer. It requires that we stay open. And you cannot stay open when your nervous system is in full protection mode. So we tend to ourselves first. And then we get curious about what walked in with them. And we remember, just as I am bringing my story, so are they. And both of our stories are held by the one who knew them before a word was ever spoken. I want to acknowledge something that might be present for you right now. Some of you are thinking about a specific conversation, a specific relationship, a moment that went sideways and you've been carrying it, maybe for a long time. And maybe what we've talked about today is giving you some language for it, or some compassion for yourself or for them. Or maybe it's raised more questions than it's answered. That's okay too. You don't have to resolve it today. Connection isn't the absence of misattunement. It's what happens next. The fact that two people miss each other sometimes, that they walk in carrying more than the conversation can see, that is not the end of the story. Healthy relationships are not the ones where this never happens. They are the ones that learn how to find their way back. Next week, we're going to talk about that, about repair, about what it looks like to return to someone after the moment has passed and something between you has been bruised. But before we could talk about how to come back, we needed to understand why we sometimes drift. We needed to name what's already in the room before the first word. And now you do. There is grace for your humanity. Grace for the moments you miss each other. Grace for the stories you are still learning to carry well. Grace for the long, slow work of becoming people who love more gently. You are not doing this alone. And you are not doing it from a place of emptiness. You're doing it as someone who is already fully known, before a word is on your tongue, by the one who entered flesh, so that nothing about your humanity would be foreign to him. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Until next Wednesday, be slow, be curious about what you carry, be his.